Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we start, can I just double check? Can everyone hear me well? Is my voice clear? If you can just write in the chat that you can hear me. Okay, thank you very much for joining us for this talk on how we can provide a safe cyber world for women. My name is Bushra AlAhmadi, and I have recently finished my PhD in cybersecurity from the University of Oxford. I'm also a GDG lead in Oxford, where I'm currently based. Also, if you have any questions after this talk, here's my Twitter handle. And also feel free to write your question in the chat area, and I'll be taking your questions at the end of the talk. Okay, let's get started. So for this talk, I will first start by talking about the cyber threats that women face in the cyber world. Then I will talk about the tools and applications available that can help us tackle this problem and can help us developers or machine learning experts so that we can provide a better cyberspace for everyone. So let's talk first about threats. So the internet is really a very incredible tool. It has empowered women to speak up, react, and organize to face oppression. It connected women from all over the world to share ideas, our pains and successes and achievements, and allowed us really to amplify our voices and bring us all women together. But unfortunately, the internet is very not a neutral place, as you may know. It's very sexist, racist, Islamophobic, and other violent types of behavior and content, which unfortunately disproportionately affecting women. And why do people do that? It's that people hide behind the anonymity that is provided by the online world. They think that they can write these posts because they won't be held accountable and no one will detect them. So in time where we women have fought so hard to be heard, to speak up, and to voice our opinions, the brutal world we all face online of harassment, bullying, shaming have really impacted our confidence, our self-esteem, and really our passion to make a difference in the world. And that, unfortunately, is really forcing us back to silence. So studies have shown that women are more likely to be subjected to online harassment and violence in online platforms, subjected to massive campaigns of abuse and intimidation, or exploitation and manipulation of their private data. And private data can be, for example, their photos or pictures. So in this talk, we will address the threats that impact people in general in the online world, but focus on the effect they have on women in particular. So let's talk first about what we mean by online harassment. So online harassment is a form of bullying or harassment where the perpetrator uses electronic means. For example, they can use online platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube to repeatedly impose harm on an individual. So that's what we mean by online harassment. And the kind of harmful behavior that they can do can include posting rumors about a person, threats, sexual remark, also posting a victim's personal information or any kind of form of hate speech. And the goal really is to impose harm on a victim. So why do you think harassment is highly frequent on online platforms? What makes it a hub for this kind of abuse that we might not see as much in the physical world? So there are many reasons, and really feel free to share your thoughts on this in the chat as well. I really want this to be a discussion for all of us to really kind of brainstorm how we can tackle this problem. But mostly there are two factors that make online harassment very common. The first of all is little accountability. So little accountability of malicious attackers, leading them to feeling of impunity. So perpetrators can post harmful content about the victim because they think they will not be caught and held accountable. Also, another factor is the lack of knowledge from these companies and developers about the violence abuse that happen in their infrastructures. So even now, even they know that there is abuse, it's still a challenge in detecting and stopping such abusive content. And such platforms are still really trying to build solutions that tackle this problem effectively. And for example, if you look at the tweets on the right, so in 2017, there was a movement on Twitter that used a hashtag called Women Boycott Twitter, because women were frustrated by how Twitter were handling women harassment on their platforms. So victims on online platforms feel they are left with little support for the violence they have encountered, as you can see from the examples on the right. So unfortunately, this really leads women to self-censor, to restrict their freedom of expression and their meaningful participation online. And the main harassment we face as women are from those that try to undermine our intelligence, our knowledge, and our righteousness of being in any leadership position. And I think many, many women have heard these phrases where, for example, you belong in the kitchen, or other phrases that try to undermine our intelligence and knowledge. So let's talk about another threat called cyber stalking. So cyber stalkers may use email, instant messages, phone calls, and other communication modes to stalk you. So cyber stalking can take the form of, for example, sexual harassment, inappropriate contact, or unwelcome attention to your life, to your family's life. And that leads to the person being stalked, being intimidated or frightened. So cyber stalking can start really from the cyber world. So someone might stalk you in the cyber world, and that leads to you to being also stalked in the physical world. And the stalker uses technology to monitor and locate the victim's location, who are your friends, your relatives, identify personal information about you, for example, where you work, where do you like to buy your latte. So all of these are considered information about you that stalkers look for. So finding such information, if you really think about it, is not really difficult to find out, really. So with more and more people posting their pictures and sharing what they eat and their everyday movements on social media, it makes it very easier to stalkers to kind of gather this information about you. And there are many, many stories in the news of perpetrators that invade a person's home because they knew they were on a holiday from their social media posts. So a person might be stalked online to find about their location, but also stalked and gathered information about them for identity theft and other harmful objectives. So how can you protect yourself, and how can women protect themselves from such a threat? Well, we all have to really think about what they call the digital footprint. How much information about ourselves, about our families, about our life in general do we post online? And try to limit these to as much as possible so these people cannot use that for malicious intent. So if I ask you, how many friends on Facebook do you have? So how many friends? So usually the average Facebook user has around 338 friends. And the chances are that you've never actually met some of those people and don't know really who they are. So criminals can exploit this carelessness by befriending you and then monitor your account to collect information. So for example, they might look for vacation photos outside your home country, which means your house is probably empty and they can break into. But the good thing is never too late to take control of your personal data, and regulations such as the GDPR or the right to be forgotten allow you to access these platforms and ask that your personal information be deleted. So it's never too late to do that. So let's talk about another threat, which is doxing. So doxing means the perpetrator publishes the victim's personal information online for the intention to threaten, abuse, or harass. So your personal information includes your name, phone number, address, information about your family, where you live, or photos without or publish photos without your consent to cause harm. And one kind of causing harm is defamation. So for defamation, the perpetrator can post a statement online, for example, on Twitter or Facebook, that causes serious harm to a person's reputation. And this is called defamation. When someone posts something on you online that is untrue to ruin your reputation, that's defamation. And you can absolutely file a complaint against that person in court. And the main thing is that statement can be posting words, spoken words, or posting a photo about you, but it must be untrue. So for it to be considered defamation, the statement that that person posts about you should be untrue. Although in some countries, communicating a true statement about a person online to ruin their reputation is also considered defamation. So let's talk about the story of Purnima Shil. So in 2001, Purnima was only a 13-year-old girl when she was gang raped in Bangladesh. It was in newspapers all around the world. So 15 years later, she was still being abused and ashamed on social media. And in 2013, she discovered a Facebook page that used her name and photo, even posting her office address and phone number on that Facebook page, pretending to be her. And in that Facebook page, they were posting inappropriate content and photos of women, indicating that she was available for hire. So at that time, she was working at a local TV station where many of her friends and colleagues accepted friend requests from that Facebook account because they thought it was genuine. They thought that Facebook account belonged to her. So the page and its post was the subject of malicious gossip in her workplace that led her to leave her job. And society continued to shame her for that post that were not hers, for something that was never her doing. So she never found out who was behind the Facebook page, which was finally taken down early 2016 after her and her friends repeated complaints for Facebook to remove that Facebook page. So it took nearly 3 years for Facebook to take down that page. And you can imagine the amount of damage that happened to her reputation and the amount of abuse that she received for that Facebook page. So this is an example of defamation, where someone stole her identity, posted inappropriate statements and pictures, and claiming that it was from her. So that's untrue statements, and that caused harm to her reputation. So this leads us to talk about a very emerging threat due to advances in AI, and that is unfortunately being used by perpetrators. So, which is deepfakes. So morphing was originally used to create visuals in advertisement, movies, and animation. However, with the technology being easily accessible, its negative effects has started to surface on social media and the internet. And one example of its negative use is deepfakes. So deepfakes is synthetic media in which a person in an existing image or video is replaced with someone else's likeness. So they take a video that exists and replace the face in that video with someone else's face. And the machine learning method that you use to create deepfakes is based on deep learning. So deepfakes have been used negatively to generate, for example, revenge pornographic videos, fake news, and that had led both industry and government to try to attempt to detect them and limit their use. And we have started to recently see real-world examples of deepfake pornography being used explicitly to silence and discredit women's voices, ruin their reputation, and preventing them even from taking part in politics. And that takes us to the story of Rana. So one example of creating deepfakes to discredit women is the story of Rana. So Rana is an Indian investigative journalist that found herself the victim of a pornographic deepfake that spread on WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all social media accounts. And it was a clear attempt to discredit her work and humiliate her into silence. And due to her nature of her job, so she's a journalist, so some seek to discredit her with misogynist statements and abuse. And even people have called her the most abused woman in India. And due to her reporting of a story about an 8-year-old Kashmiri girl who had been raped and created outrage across the country, she was a victim of a deepfake porn plot that intended to silence her from that story. So someone actually created a deepfake of her face in a pornographic video. And she was harassed and doxxed off the back of the deepfake that caused her to be more cautious of what she posts online. So Rana's reluctant and self-censoring of what she posts online is really not a surprise. So especially in countries like MENA, where a photoshopped photo, or even worse, a pornographic video can lead to serious harm to women or even death. So pictures that women in the West would post without second thought might be in parts of MENA be extremely controversial. So what would you consider to be controversial pictures in the MENA region? Please feel free to comment on the chat and discuss this. But a study has conducted to look at what was considered controversial in the MENA, and they found many kind of pictures, for example, or poses, such as provocative poses, or using even duck face, dancing, showing any kind of emotional, even posting your relationship status might be considered controversial. And all of these are sensitive information, and that perpetrators can use to defamation, whether posting written statements or photos that can cause serious harm and shame to women. And that's why I wrote, it's a shame pandemic that we live in, because everything you post, we have to self-censor because it can be used in the wrong hands. So not only do we need, as developers and AI experts, machine learning experts, to think about solutions to detecting such threats, I think it's also equally important to create awareness to families that these technologies exist, and a deepfake of their daughter or a Photoshop of their daughter does not mean it's true. Okay, so we talked about some threats that women face in the cyber world, but there are more. There are many, many more. And when women around the world are using their collective power to speak out and amplify their voices through social media platforms, the online platforms' failure to adequately tackle violence and abuse on their platforms means that instead of women using their voices to make an impact and change the world, women are instead being pushed back and pushed backwards to a culture of silence. And this leads to women to choose to remain nameless or faceless in social media platforms out of fear, out of anxiety of what would happen if they got abused. So a poll conducted in 2017 using an online survey of around 500 women across 8 countries that studied the psychological impact of abuse. And the #1 impact abuse had on women was low self-esteem. So abuse, or online abuse and harassment, has affected their confidence. It also has affected their apprehension. So their anxiety, so it also causes apprehension. So anxiety and fear of using social media, and also a sense of powerlessness. And these are all preventing women from actually using their voice to make a difference and shy away from being known or being visible in social media. So what do you do if you're a victim of online harassment of abuse? So one thing's for sure, you should report them. And platforms now allow you to report harassment online. And as we saw in Purnima's story, she reported the Facebook page in 2013, and it was only removed in 2016. So hopefully that has improved since then, but we still have seen that we needed to report repeatedly for the social media platforms to take response. And if you are afraid in calling out and reporting the perpetrator, there are platforms that exist, for example, HeartMob. So HeartMob is a tool where people can document the harassment they are experiencing on social media and request the support they need from an online community. And one of the things they offer is the HeartBot, which is a Twitter bot that will call out the perpetrator itself. So how does it work? So if someone is posting abusive or harassment posts on Twitter, you can actually send that tweet via direct messaging on Twitter to the bot. And the chat bot will reply and ask you to confirm that you are registered as a HeartMobber. So a HeartMobber in that platform is a volunteer that helps detect harassment online. So once you authenticate, it then replies directly to the abusive tweet, calling them out as the harasser. So although this approach might not stop the harassment from happening in the first place, but it can definitely remove the sense of impunity and lack of accountability that perpetrators might feel due to the anonymity nature of the internet. So for the bot, calling them out and shaming them would hopefully make them stop and think again before posting anything abusive next time. So I want to ask you this question, and feel free to post in the chat if you know the answer. But do you know how to report online harassment or abuse in your country? Have you looked that up before? So do you know how to report online harassment or abuse in your country? So yes, there are platforms that can use to report abuse or regulations that are from your country. But the problem is that perpetrator needs to reside in your own country. But what happens if the perpetrator is from outside your country? That's a challenge that we have to think about when building solutions that tackle this issue. How would the proposed solution tackle cross jurisdictions? So for example, when a crime happens in the physical world and the criminal resides in another country, then the International Criminal Police Organization, or more commonly known as the Interpol, which is an international organization that facilitates worldwide police cooperation and crime control. So we have the Interpol for crimes that happen in the physical world. But such organizations for cyber criminals is still a challenge and yet to be solved. So unfortunately, although you can report an abuser in your country, that abuser or perpetrator needs to be in your own country for your law enforcement to take action. And unfortunately, that's a challenge when they're in another country, which is what usually happens in the internet and cyber world. Okay, so we have talked about the various threats that people face in the online world in general and their impact on women in particular. And as you can see, it's really an ongoing problem that requires us technologists to really brainstorm and think of ideas to tackle this important issue. So in this section, I'll continue to talk about the available tools that are at our disposal that we can use to develop solutions. Okay. So let's talk about how we can detect deepfake. So deep learning has given rise to technologies that would have been thought impossible only a handful of years ago. So deep learning, as it can be used for the greater good, can be used to make great useful applications. It can also be used by perpetrators to cause harm, such as revenge porn, as we saw in Rana's story. And that has elicited responses from both industry and government to detect and limit their use. And it's still an ongoing challenge, even for researchers, to detect deepfakes. And as you may know, the most difficult thing when we build, one of the most challenging things when we want to create ML or AI models is the presence of a good quality data set, so we can train and evaluate our models. So in collaboration with Jigsaw, Google AI announced early this year the release of a large data set of visual deepfakes called Face Forensics++, which is a data set that consists around 1,000 videos of videos that have been manipulated with 4 automated face manipulation methods, which is deepfakes, face-to-face, face swap, and so on. So if you search for Face Forensics++, you can find this data set on GitHub, and you can use that to try and tackle this problem. And if you succeed, there is actually a competition for Kaggle that closes soon, if you are interested, of $1 million for whoever proposes a solution for deepfake. Okay, so as you can see, many of these online harassment really happen in social networks, such as Facebook and Twitter. And there are tools for social network analysis that we can use to tackle this problem. So social network analysis tools facilitate the analysis of social networks by describing networks' features, either visually or through numerical representation. So it's generally a graph where the nodes represent the people, and the edges between and connecting these nodes represents the connection. So this is useful, for example, if you want to detect who's the leader of a massive campaign or started the harassment campaign against an individual. So you can use this social network analysis to determine who are the people who are harassing that individual and who they have, who are the people they have in common that might have led to this campaign. And here are some examples of the most, well, some of the social network analysis software that are available and are free. The first one is Python based, so it can be used with Python-based machine learning libraries. Okay, so let's talk about image detection. So when we talked about Purnima's story, we said that she found a Facebook page that was using her photo, stealing her identity, and impacting her reputation, right? So she was able to find that friend when a friend told her about it. So Facebook now has a feature called photo review that can enable, and it means Facebook can send you a notification when someone posts a photo with you in the picture, so you can review and approve. And this can be somehow helpful in cases when one person tries to impersonate another, or when you personally feel that adding photos of your, when you personally fear adding photos of yourself on Facebook because you are worried they might end up in the wrong hands or be widely distributed without your permission or knowledge. So obviously this feature uses face recognition to detect these images. And of course, there are privacy implications that you really have to consider before enabling this feature. And I don't have time at the moment to talk about the privacy implications, but these are really things that you have to think about when enabling such features that use your face in a face recognition engine. And there have been many talks, I think, this week that will talk about, in general, Google Cloud APIs that are available, such as Google Cloud Vision, Video Intelligence, and so on. But I'll just talk briefly about text analysis that we can use to detect harassment in social media platforms, and what we can do using Cloud Natural Language APIs. So really, we talked about how perpetrators can post abusive and harmful posts targeting an individual online, right? So when designing tools that can be used to detect harmful posts, the immediate approach that comes to our mind is text analysis, meaning analyzing the text in a post to determine if it's a neutral or abusive post that should be reported. And one of the tools available for text analysis is Google's Cloud Natural Language API. So this API provides natural language understanding for developers, including sentiment analysis, entity analysis, and content classification, and syntax analysis. So what do we mean by entity analysis? So entity analysis inspects the given text to detect known entities. So it can identify public figures or landmarks and so on. Analyzing syntax, meaning the arrangements of words in a sentence such that they make grammatical sense. And there's also text classification, which is also known as text tagging or text categorization. And it's the process of categorizing text into organized groups. And text classifiers can automatically analyze text and then assign a set of predefined tags or categories based on the content of that text. So we mentioned that Cloud Natural Language API also provides sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis is the interpretation and classification of emotions. So determining if it's positive, negative, and neutral within text data using text analysis techniques. And sentiment analysis have been allowing businesses to really identify customer sentiment towards a product or a brand or a service in, for example, online conversation and feedback. So they can determine if the person is happy with a product, not happy, or is neutral about it. And sentiment analysis is very useful in detecting online harassment posts, especially because it lets you know whether a post is positive, negative, neutral, which can also be useful when trying to detect harassment posts online. I also want to mention this tool, which is probably not very known for developers, but is known in research. And it's LIWC. It's called LIWC, which is Linguistic Inquiry and Word Count, which analyzes text that a person has written and determines their psychological traits. You can actually find many research papers that use LIWC to detect harmful content online. A lot of the research papers actually look at it in Twitter and Facebook. So feel free to search for those on Google Scholar or any other search portal to find these papers. But they are a very good indication of a person's psychological characteristics. And you can read more about that kind of research. So what do all these text analysis tools have really in common? Well, they actually work wonderfully in many languages except Arabic. So as you can see, Cloud Natural Language API does not support Arabic. So it does not support entity analysis. It does not support sentiment analysis, which is one of the main reasons online platforms struggle to automatically detect harassment and abusive content written in Arabic. So let's dig a little bit deeper on Arabic's text analysis on why it is a challenge. So there are many reasons Arabic text analysis is a challenge. With Arabic being the official language in 24 different countries, that means various Arab dialects and the use of slang words that differ among regions in MENA. And this makes it really a challenge when we want to create a dictionary that defines meanings of words of these dialects and that we can use for text analysis to detect harassment posts written in Arabic. So it is a challenge. Many dialects and a lack of dictionary that captures these abusive content. lack of capitalization as well for words to express emotion. So in English, for example, if you're angry or want attention, you kind of write the words in all caps, correct? So instead of capitalization, Arabic uses elongations, which is repeated sequences of words. And that causes misclassifications of words when we use it for text analysis. Another challenge is the deliberate misspelling of words is used to reduce the amount of letters in a tweet in order to meet the Twitter limitation. In order to meet the Twitter limitation, some people remove some letters in the Arabic text. And that also causes to problems for detection and text analysis. Also, using symbols to reflect letters in the words leads to misspellings and confuses attempts to automatically determine the word meaning. So, for example, when you replace the number, you can use the number 3 to present the letter in Arabic, and that also causes confusion when even for English text analysis. And Arabic researchers have really been working hard to address this challenge of Arabic text processing. And this is an available tool that is free, and it's available on GitHub. It's called Farasa, and it's it's built specifically for Arabic text analysis. So as you can see, we still have a long way to go for detecting online harassment and providing a safe cyberspace that is free from harassment and abuse for everyone. And I really hope that this talk gives you an overview of the kind of harassment that we all face, especially women, and hopefully give you some inspiration on how we can tackle them using the tools I discussed, especially those that are written in Arabic. As I have mentioned, one of the reasons that Arabic text analysis is challenging is the lack of a proper dictionary that reflects the various phrases used by the 24 Arabic countries that, where Arabic is their first language, and the various dialects. To make a start, I have created just a simple Google form where you can contribute and list the Arabic phrases and words that are used in your own country to represent the various form of use. So please do go to this form and fill it out when you can and share it with your network and really help us in making the cyber world a welcoming space for everyone. And with that, I want to thank you very much for listening. I will be taking questions now in the chat, but also if you have any follow-up questions, as I said, here is my Twitter handle. Feel free to direct message me of any questions if you have, or if you want specific resources, I'm happy to help. So thank you very much, and I'll be taking your questions now in the comments. Brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing the link. So yes, please feel free to go to that link and write as many Arabic words or phrases that you know of, and share it with your network. I'll making this dictionary available. I'll probably run it through some experts to kind of make sure that the phrases are correct, but hopefully people can continue to contribute and tackle this problem. Does anyone have questions? I'm trying to, it's a bit slow getting the questions, but I'll try to spot them. But if there's a specific question that I missed, please feel free to post it again. Yes, definitely. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send me, to text me on Twitter. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. If no one has any more questions, I'll just wait a little bit. Same there can be confusing. So we have a question from Jacqueline. Back to the difficulties of contributing to the Arabic word. Do you have an example of using repeated same letter that can be confused by another word? So it's not necessarily, it might be confused to another word. I don't have an example in mind, but it can also cause misclassification because people kind of generally add more letters in Arabic to emphasize, similar of how we use caps in English. I don't have a specific example in mind for that. Yes, so what do we mean by deepfakes? So deepfakes is, if you, let me go back to, let me see if I can go back. Okay. So here, so if you look at the video on the right, so the person on the of the woman, the one on the left is the correct video, and the one on the right is someone else's face that has been injected onto the video, and it looks real. I would also recommend that if you Google if you search on YouTube for deepfakes, there are many examples, celebrity, politicians, where people have used their videos to inject another person's face into that. So that's an example of what we mean by deepfakes. So محمد يوجد أيضا أن هناك التشكيل يغير المعنى الكلام. That has been done in research in the tool that I have mentioned called Farasa. If you check out that tool and check out their research, it's an ongoing research area. Yes. So another thing is emojis. There are APIs that you can use to consider emojis into your text analysis. Text analysis, basically, you take the text and you have to filter out these things. So, for example, emojis. Do you want to consider them or not? Because they can cause a little bit of problems in your text classifications, but there are some that do look at emojis as well. Any other questions? I think we have a little less than 15 minutes. So if anyone has questions, feel free to post. Any other questions? Well, as I said, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send me a message through Twitter. So safe, I think, what if we don't have cyber police in the country? Another way is you can contact the platforms that have posted it. And I think also Google, you can request Google to remove indexing of yourself, I believe. So feel free to look at the platforms that you want them to remove that abusive content and directly contact them. Unfortunately, social media, how can social media detect that there's a fake person, fake data, or using another real data of different person? It usually comes through reporting, really. So if you do report it or people report it, they take into account. But they also look at other things. For example, if the account is active, is it posting things? And so on. And usually people, when you report that someone has stolen our identity in these social media platforms, I think they're quicker now to respond. So algorithms have been used to create deepfakes. It's mainly deep learning. So they use deep learning. I think they generative. So they use GANs to create these deepfakes. Okay, great. Thank you very much for tuning in to and listening to the presentation. I hope you have found it useful. And do feel again to send me messages if you have any follow-up questions. And please do share the survey I sent to create a dictionary and encourage people to post their phrases in Arabic. That'd be really helpful in detecting abusive content in Arabic. And thank you so much again.